This episode is about minutes 61 through 65 of The Empire Strikes Back with returning guest Ender Smith. Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, feel free to call me Xanthi, and today is all about minutes 61 through 65 of Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. In this set of minutes, the Millennium Falcon escapes from the Exegorth, the space slug, and we get into Jedi training with Luke and Yoda, and we get into the magic tree sequence, which I'm extremely excited to talk about. And Ender, whom you may know from AurekFonts, the Twitter account, the brand, the business, the legend, is back on the show for the third time. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to talking about this set of minutes with you, especially since you were particularly interested in talking about the magic tree. So yeah, it's always I don't know why. So I'll be finding out along with everyone else. I'm certainly interested in talking about it. Listeners who have stuck with the show since the very first season, which was The Last Jedi, may remember that I did an episode about Rey's journey into the cave. And that in that episode, I was doing a lot of comparisons between Rey going into the cave and Luke going into the cave, the magic tree. So I will also I'll also make a few Last Jedi comparisons in this episode to refresh everyone's memory, or at least draw some sort of connection, because those are obviously two very related scenes for the two respective heroes. So
yes,
yeah, lots of, oh my gosh, there's going to be a lot of good stuff to get into today. Why don't we just start by listening to the beginning of the minutes?
Let's go.
All right. It's going to be loud because the asteroid cave is going to be shaking right now and the ground is like buckling. And so, yeah, just be warned.
I don't think it's wise.
We're trying to discuss this in committee.
Ooh, I am not a committee.
Okay, I'll pause it there for a second. This is the cue, 6M3. This is not a cave. FYI, it started at the very end of the last set of minutes, but we hear most of it in this set of minutes. It's pretty short. Do you have any thoughts, feelings about this sequence? The Minox, the Falcon, the music?
Yeah, so I liked really getting into this particular minute because this is music that I know very well, but I haven't, sat and thought about specifically as score before, just because it's just exciting. It's very, very tense throughout, and but then it actually goes through just after where you paused. It starts going through some changes in emotion. Yeah.
So the sort of riff, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it's mainly. The main sounding instrument, I would say, is horns. I don't know if you would agree. I
think so.
Yeah. So there's that top line, which is like a very chromatic, right? So it descends by half step. And let me actually play a bit of that, because then I'll reveal that it's not actually only horns. I'll go back a little bit.
the committee.
Well, that was the same riff, but now it's up a half step. So, yeah. The three voices are planing. They're three voices that are moving by the same amount of steps each time, and it's a very common thing in Star Wars. So, the top line will be, the middle line will be like, the bottom line. But I know that you have your guitar out, so I feel like I agree with you. We were talking before we started recording that the guitar is actually a good instrument to demonstrate planing on.
Yes. So what planing is, if I were to describe it, is just all of the notes of a chord move to the next chord without changing position relative to each other. And that's pretty easy to see on the guitar. So this is my barely rehearsed rendition of that melody. That part's hard on the guitar.
Yeah. But I feel like anyone who's like tinkered around on the guitar is sort of familiar with that, with doing that sort of thing, where you just keep your fingers in place and slide around.
Yeah, and what you said about it being chromatic, it just means that it's moving without very many big jumps between it, and not based on a specific key, or it may be based on a specific key, but it's using all of the notes of the in between. And so I think over the course of it, it hits 7 consecutive chromatic notes in 3 different places because it's the 3 separate lines.
Yeah, it's not really centered around like a very obvious key or tonal center. And well, Frank Lehman talks about this in his book Hollywood Harmony, sort of like film music's propensity for evading like monotonality, so to speak. And this is a really good example of that, where kind of trying too hard to maybe analyze it with Roman numerals or something might not be the best way. It just might not reveal it's not really the type of music that would benefit the most from that, perhaps. So thinking about these sort of smaller cells can be more revealing. And here we have a good example of sequencing, which is like when you do the same pattern, but in up a step or like down a step or something. And one of the more obvious places this happens is also like the snow speeders on Hoth, where, I don't know, in episode 4 of this season, we were talking about how like the snow speeder thing will then go up, like it kind of jumps all over the place, but with the same pattern. And so here it is doing a similar thing. So we'll listen to it again. Oh, and by the way, I said it's not just horns at the beginning. It is also cello. It's also violins. Violins and violas. But you can't really hear them as they don't really stand out as much as the horns, but they just fortify the overall sound. But yeah, we do have some like, and yeah. All right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't picked up on. I know that you constantly use different. I think each time the sequence or the cell repeats,
different instruments.
I think it's slightly different instrumentation, and I think that the different mixtures add different textures and feelings to it. So even though it's repeating very similar sounds, it definitely like. It makes it not feel like we're just repeating the same thing over and
100%, yeah. That's a really good point, because there are all these subtle like the amount of times the sort of pattern switches up in some way are a lot. They're a lot. Like the orchestration will change like every 4 bars, or like just something is always sort of keeping it fresh. And by the way, also the cello and bass line is, and I think bass clarinet even, are doing this staccato eighth notes. So listen out for that. All right, here we go. They're so low that you more so feel it.
Yeah, it's lost in the rumble.
Totally. So now it's about to go up a half step, and now you can obviously hear flutes,
Empire is still out there. I don't think it's possible.
piccolo.
I am not a committee.
And there it's also going up chromatically. Yeah, the way that the upper woodwinds all join in the second time when it's up higher, I feel like it serves to both escalate the sense of peril, and also just makes it more audible over the low rumble and over the voices.
Yeah. I had some notes about the non-musical aspects of that
please.
same section.
Yeah.
First, there was a line that I definitely misheard, and I had to go find somebody to double check the subtitles for me.
Oh.
Because I heard Leia when Leia is yelling at Han.
Yes.
It sounded to me like she's saying, "Those vampires are still out there," but that is not what the words are. According to the subtitles, it's "the Empire is still out there," which does make more sense. But I thought, did she call the Minox vampires? That would be really interesting. But it's slightly less interesting. And
okay.
but then the other thing is just about both Han and Leia yelling. They're yelling at a volume that kind of accommodates the amount of rumble and kind of makes it feel believable that they are hearing that sound also.
Yeah.
Because they're yelling loud enough that a lot of their words are hard to hear, and it's primarily the emotions getting across, which relates to a thing that I recently heard from the director's commentary for Die Hard. And he said that he has a very interesting position on the purpose of dialogue in films, which is that it exists purely to verbally communicate emotion, and that like to audibly communicate emotion, rather than like he considers it part of the soundtrack and less what they're saying, because he watched a lot of foreign films as a kid without reading the subtitles, and then went back and read the subtitles on subsequent viewings and realized that it fell short for him from what emotion he was getting from the actors once he knew what they were actually saying.
You mean the foreign films fell short for him?
Yeah. Just that once he knew what they were saying, it didn't have the same impact to him than when he was just hearing the emotions behind every line. And I think that's a really interesting.
Does that sort of signify that the movies that he was watching, the emotion didn't match with the content of the words, like the content of the dialogue?
I think it would be that his interpretation of the emotions might not match with the dialogue, or that the emotions felt bigger or more profound
without knowing what they were saying.
Without knowing that, oh, that's what he's mad about. You know, it's this specific thing that he's mad about, rather than just, wow, he's very angry, or she's very, very happy about this situation, you know?
Oh, that is interesting. I'll have to think about that. It doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree entirely.
I don't know
But
if I
I think that
agree,
there's
but I don't know
something
if I
to it.
disagree either. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I'll just have to think about that more because there is. I think about certain perhaps shows, perhaps sometimes Star Wars shows, um, where I feel like the dialogue is doing a lot of work in terms of like the dialogue is telling the story, but I'm not sometimes getting it. I'm sometimes not feeling it or getting it even. Um, and I'm realizing that sort of the directing and the way that the actors are carrying the lines makes a really big difference in my overall like understanding of what's going on
Yeah.
or investment certainly because like you said or like that person said just knowing the dialogue itself just knowing like I don't know just knowing on paper what is happening isn't always enough uh, to get the
Yeah.
feeling.
And then one more thing is that at the very end of the clip that you just played, C-3PO gets knocked over by the rocking of the ship, and he screams, and I'm not sure if it's Anthony Daniels or like a clip of the Wilhelm scream, like a cut short version. I'm not sure. It's
My notes. Yeah.
I think it's C-3PO. It reads to me like it's C-3PO, but I do not know.
Yeah, let's play that again because I have been curious about the scream too. Like it's we see 3PO on screen while we hear the scream, but it just doesn't quite sound like him for some reason. You be the judge, listeners.
Let's get out of here! This Empire is still out there. I don't think it's wise.
Time to discuss this in committee.
I am not a
Coming up.
committee.
That. I don't know.
I love it if it is C-3PO.
I love it too. It's a little bit more high pitched than I'm used to hearing him because he certainly does scream other times, but I feel like it's more like I don't know. He screams like in a British accent a lot of the time, like. But this feels more maybe. I mean, it's a very visceral, high pitched scream, so maybe that's just what's happening. Yeah. So actually, this is pretty much the end of that cue. We'll just hear it play out.
You can't make the junk of lightspeed in this asteroid field.
Down, sweetheart, we're taking off. I see it, I see it.
We do. The cave is collapsing.
Okay.
No cave.
Not quite the end. We're almost at the end. Okay. And okay, that is a thick ending. Yeah, we'll go back and talk about that a little bit. There's a lot of Star Wars happening there.
Yes. So right at the very beginning of that, it's actually planing minor chords again, but with bigger jumps between them rather than being chromatic, or being purely chromatic. And to me, it feels much more adventurous and possibly heroic, even though it's still minor chords, which for the part of my brain that, grew up thinking, minor is sad. Coming to recognize this is like, it's still there's still a little bit of profoundness in acknowledging that, but this is all minor and it sounds heroic,
Okay, do you mean the sextuplets? Like, just point it out when we get there. I'll
I think it's right when you start.
Okay.
You can't make the junk of lightspeed in this asteroid field.
Down, sweetheart, we're
Before this?
Right here. It's those slow chords.
Oh, the slow chords. Oh, okay.
They're all minor. But they don't feel all minor like the Imperial March feels all minor. and they don't feel all minor like just a few moments ago they were all minor chords.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, you're talking about because there's so many planing chords.
Yes.
Yeah, you're talking about before they jump to lightspeed. And what I like about that, or what I think that part of the music just it feels slower. It feels like it's holding back. Like it feels like loading up like the slingshot kind of before
Yes,
letting
that's
it
such a good
go. And so the way that it's like pulling back, but it's still moving forward. It feels like ramping up that like potential energy or whatever. So okay, let's listen to that while thinking about the slowness and the minorness. Here.
You can't make the jump of light speed in this asteroid field.
Down, sweetheart, we're taking off.
And of course, the twinkly glockenspiel there, that's like
yes.
the stars. You know they're going to go to light speed. Yeah, that's pretty funny.
And actually, I was mistaken. That's the part that starts on an A flat major chord. Actually, there's lots of major chords in there. There's just
I was gonna.
minor chords. I was wrong.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
But there is like the leaps that are happening. I don't know. They're the leaps between the notes are bigger, and I'm trying to. Okay. Well, let's see.
Jump of light speed in this asteroid field.
Down, sweetheart, we're taking off.
Yeah, so like we have a minor third or an augmented second, really. And then just down a half step. So we have this like chromaticism again, and it kind of goes between these two notes. It really does. I stand by the metaphor of the slingshot or pulling back the sling. And then of course, I'll just pick up right where we left off, jumping into hyperspace.
And this sounds like I feel like that motif is at least very similarly orchestrated to the prepping at the Battle of Hoth. The prepping in Echo Base just before the.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's exactly the same.
Now,
but it's a very similar like dun 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 dun.
Yeah. Do you mean
is how it ends in the Hoth sequence? Do
you mean the orchestration, or do you mean like literally the music, the cue, the rhythm, and the?
It's all pretty similar. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not going to say I think they're the same because I have not checked side by side.
I feel like what's unique about it to me, or like what characterizes it, I guess you could say, is the unity of the rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear that.
No! I see it. We do!
The cave is collapsing.
This is no cave.
Right.
What?
So not anymore. But for a few bars, we have all of the instruments that are playing, which is like the low brass, like trombones and tuba. And even the actually strings are doing it too. They're wait, it's like one. They're all in unison. And so the unity of both the notes and the rhythm, I do know what you mean. And I'm thinking maybe it's, you know what? It reminds me of this part. I'm going to attempt to play part of the Battle of Hoth. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yes, that is definitely.
Cool. Yep. Now it carries the unison even longer in that, but that's a good connection.
And I think similarly there, it does the slowing down thing to kind of build up, to pull back the slingshot.
Mm.
I think that's a thing to watch for in John Williams's scoring.
Yeah. The slingshot or the unison?
The slingshot
Yeah.
specifically, but yeah.
Yeah.
Also the other thing.
Both the unison and the slingshot, especially the unison slingshot. But yeah, so in Frank Lehman's catalog, that part that I just played, the whatever, is part. It's what he calls motif or whatever, label E. You know, he has the Battle of Hoth, the set piece theme.
Right.
He has like the sort of a few different motifs. Well, 26 different motifs, lettered from A to Z. So that's E. Anyway, cool. That was a good connection. So additionally, let's just keep playing. So that thing, first of all, there's so much planing just happening for like in the that was not what the trumpets were actually playing, but you know, this thing. Well, no, before then.
Sweetheart, we're taking off.
Okay.
I see it.
We do. The cave is collapsing.
This is no cave.
What?
Right here. Or, well,
Yes.
also, I want to note that this, it's almost like an Imperial March hint where they're like
Oh,
yeah. And then when the horns are sort of, I guess, quadruple tonguing, or I don't really know how horn playing works, but they have these really fast 16th notes that also move chromatically, where they're like, let me play it. We're just passing it right now. Here. And it's planing, so it's like I can't play all the notes at the same time, but yeah, that to me sort of almost prefigures this this motif, this incidental motif, cascading trumpet line, I think it's called, cascading trumpet lines. Does that sound familiar to you in any way?
I definitely felt like, is this part of the asteroid field? Is this part of, like, I was trying to search for where I recognized it. Yeah.
For sure. I feel like it's also part of, I feel like I hear it in Empire Strikes Back in several moments. In Frank Lehman's catalog, he notes the first, or a clear use of it, or at least maybe, I don't know if it's hard to tell if he means like the first use of it or just a clear use of it in Return of the Jedi. And I'll play that version, which is triplets. That.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But certainly those sort of planing, descending, chromatic lines happen in multiple occasions throughout Star Wars.
Yeah.
And so to me, this feels similar. Yeah. And
I also noted C-3PO's backseat driving of yelling, "Look!" and then Han's, "I see it."
yeah.
And then also he says, "We're doomed," and I'm curious if anybody has counted the number of times that C-3PO just says the phrase "we're doomed," because I feel like it's got to be a couple.
I would be shocked if someone hasn't.
Such is the nature of the Star Wars fandom.
Yeah. Let us know the count below. So at this point, Oh yeah, of course we end the cue with more planing brass. Here. Yeah. I mean, it's not completely planing. There's some contrary motion, but the rhythmic unity is like, those 16th notes. Yeah, it's. Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean by contrary motion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked at a score reduction earlier just to.
Did you see the contrary motion?
Yeah. So there's definitely a split where I don't know which direction is going to be which for the viewer. Okay.
It's.
If I try, I can't draw it in the air. There's one line that goes up, and one line that goes like almost equally down at the same rate.
Yeah, and I think like the sense that I get from listening to it is overall, I feel like the line goes up clearly, but with just like a little part of it that's going down, like you said, and it's probably just doubling other notes that are already happening, but just the way that it approaches that bass note, because it is like the line is rising, and but then it ends on this like pretty low note, and there is a sense of like a leap, but not to mention the bass line itself is overall descending.
Yeah, I think it was the bass line that I was seeing as descending at about the same rate as the melody is ascending.
Yeah. Let's play that again. Let me play the bass line. Let's see. It's going too fast for me. But yeah, like the cello and bass are certainly holding it down. They're like, oh, my instrument doesn't go low enough, but you get it. And then there's no music for like quite some time. But
Yeah,
first,
so then we
have to mention that space slug. This is
which is
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
The space slug goes, which is a highly memeable moment. Let me see if I have a photo that I can put on screen. I certainly know that I have one, and probably meant to. I have. Okay, yeah. Oh God, I think the slug is so cute. It's so cute. And I just read the part in Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view, where it's like from the perspective of the slug. Oh, so cute. Such a cute little mouth.
Yeah, so this is just a sock puppet.
What?
As per a previous
yeah, that's what Ken said. Yeah.
yeah,
it's rising.
this
so
is
why
just
does it look so
a
good,
person's
though?
hand. Well, sorry, what I mean is that it's in shape, in form, it is a sock puppet. It's made of foam latex and all that stuff, but it is just a man's hand.
I love that.
Reaching and trying to grab the Millennium Falcon.
I love that. Well, here's my space slug. And I can't put my hand in it, but I can certainly pretend to do that. I should do this. Would be good if to remake if there's like a mitten. Yeah, a mitten.
Yeah,
would probably be good. Yeah, so that happens, and if anyone's familiar with Star Wars Robot Chicken, there is a sketch in that has Space Slug, multiple of them. I think there's 2 of them. But anyway, the screenplay says the Millennium Falcon, zooming through the monster's mouth, rolls on its side and barely makes it between 2 of the gigantic white teeth before the huge jaws slam closed. And I think it looks like the inside of a shark or whale. Like it looks kind of like Pinocchio at that point, seeing the inside of the mouth, or seeing the mouth from the inside, seeing the teeth from the inside. And then it says, the enormous space slug moves its head out of the cave as the falcon flies out of its mouth. The monster tilts its head, watching the starship fly away.
And
Yeah.
that's definitely something that that George Lucas definitely loved to capture, is showing things that we perceive as monsters, and then showing either that monster showing emotions afterward, or showing a person showing emotions about the monster, like the Rancor Keeper crying about
Yeah.
this monster. This very definitely like monstrous from Luke's perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, George Lucas does like to kind of flip the, I don't know, kind of make you, does he do that with the Wampa at all?
He does. I mean, in the special edition, it shows the Wampa holding its
Yeah,
stump.
you're right. You're right. Yeah. Yeah,
But
he
no,
does.
that was not in the original version because the
Okay.
Wampa wasn't there.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right.
Uh, well, the space slug, according to Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view, really loved having the Falcon inside of it. And I think was like sending, I don't know if you've read it, Ender, but was
I haven't read it yet, but I have read the synopsis.
okay,
so.
yeah. It's like sending the Minox as like I don't know, love notes or something, sort of like telling them like you're safe and you're loved here. I don't know, it's super weird. But that's how, from a certain point of view, is it's kind of cheeky sometimes. Okay, I have a quiz for listeners. I am going to play something, and before we discuss it, think about where in the movie do we hear this, and like what is happening during this time. Any guesses? If you listen to the soundtrack, you're probably familiar with this. Okay. I'll stop right there before continuing on with the track.
Okay.
Do you have not to put you on the spot, but you can answer if you want.
Well, I think I need to, as a representative of the listeners. I know that none of you voted for me, but I'm here to represent you. I feel. I mean, I hear Yoda's theme in there, so I assume that Yoda is on screen, which is not a shoe-in in this movie because sometimes Yoda's theme is there when he's not there. But I think that this has to be during the training montage, but I don't recognize it distinctly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's because it's low in the mix or if it's. Yeah, I'm not sure where this one goes.
So the answer to the question is, it was cut for the movie, so it's not in the movie. But
would do
it's on
it.
the soundtrack, and it's the beginning of the track. The track is the training of a Jedi Knight, and then on some soundtracks, it's the training of a Jedi Knight / the Magic Tree, and so the Magic Tree is definitely in the film, but the first cue that is on that track where it's like two cues put together is not. So at a certain point, the track does become something that is in the film, but just not the beginning part.
Okay,
But
so
it sounds so like it's
yeah,
like
so
almost
so
weird to think about that.
is the little Imperial March snippet at the end there, is that when Luke says Vader, or when Yoda? I
Oh
bet
yeah,
that
it's
that
meant
was
to be.
cued to line up.
Right. It's yeah. I'll tell you where. Yeah, I have. Okay. According to David W. Collins from the soundtrack show, these are where a few parts coincide. So, or were meant to coincide. Well, actually, first there is a Mickey Mouse part where there's a log flipped over. So it's very like. A Jedi's strength flows from the Force, but beware of the dark side. Anger, fear, aggression. The dark side of the Force are there. If once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Consume you it will, as it did Obi-Wan's apprentice. And then and then there where the Imperial March kind of answers, the call and response slower. That's when Luke asks back, "Is the dark side stronger?" And then it continues. He's like, "No, no, no. Quicker, easier, more seductive. How am I to know the good side from the bad? You will know when you are calm and at peace." And then a Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. So, of course, when he's talking about the Force. But tell me why I can't. No, no, there is no why. Nothing more will I teach you today. Clear your mind of questions. And then it's going to flow into Magic Tree shortly. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, the amount of this score that's deleted from the film, I think is really interesting, because I don't think that I would change what the movie finally is, but I would love to hear a fully scored version of it.
Yeah, like with the Hoth stuff included back as well.
And a whole bunch of stuff through the end duel with Vader. I know is originally had a lot more music that was cut as well.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see a composer's cut. Although I guess that would imply that John Williams artistically thinks that his music should have been there, where we don't know that. It seems like he wrote a lot of things, not necessarily expecting like this is how it should be. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be just an as written cut.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of like an original, all of the drafts.
There's a term in structural engineering. When you build a building, you have to file a plan with the city in a lot of cities, and you also have to file another set of plans that details that's called the as built, and that's supposed to be what we actually put into the building.
Oh, that's really good. That's good. It's a good idea.
Yeah, because there's things that you put on the original sketch that you have to make notes later that say, actually, we couldn't put an outlet there because of the ventilation duct that also had to run through there. So the outlet is actually over here. And things like that.
I'm glad that exists. That makes me feel, I don't know. I feel like I should do that for certain things that I plan, and then the way that it turns out. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So now let's listen to a bit of this scene as it is.
Right before we start.
Yeah.
Just before we start. Right toward the beginning, there is what I'm calling a glissando lizard. That I want you to tell me, is it a synth or is it an animal that's been pitch shifted weird? There's a weird sound right at the beginning of this that I hadn't ever picked up on before.
At the beginning of the scene?
Yeah, at the beginning of where you're about to play.
From the scene, right? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Let me cue it to the right spot. Okay. Now we're getting into it. Well, sort of. Oh, that?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, that was interesting. Okay, let's rewind. That was quite an interesting sound. I mean, I feel like it's something pitch shifted. I feel like that's a sound effect. Do you know the answer?
I don't know. I never heard it before today, and then I was like, wait a second.
I think what's
Another thing I've never heard.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about it is that it's harmonized. Oh, maybe he put it through a harmonizer. Maybe Ben Burtt put it through a harmonizer because he
Oh.
did do
Yeah, it could
that
just
for
be
the
like a
Snow
frog
Speeders.
or something.
Let's see. Okay. I'm going to go back to what he has said about Dagobah. So he said, Ben Burtt says, Dagobah is a great opportunity for a sound designer because you can create an unseen world that's off camera. You can give it a vastness that's not really there. I started out with some recordings of birds in a zoo, but they were in a very, very echoey aviary. So when you slowed down the recording of the echoey birds, they became spooky howls, which really had the right feel. But mixing in with that were a lot of other animals. We had some recordings done of raccoons that are in a bathtub in order to confine them so they wouldn't run away from the microphone. Okay. It doesn't really mention a lizard, a glissando lizard, a glizzard. Let's see. Oh, yeah. I don't think it's not a shock that he hasn't mentioned this specific one lizard. Minox are horses played backwards. Okay. Yeah, but I guess it's fun to theorize. Maybe a listener knows. But knowing that some of his tools, some of his tricks include pitching up and down, up backwards, and harmonizing. I'm gonna say I'm gonna guess that it's something harmonized. Meaning there's like two pitches happening at once. I'll play that one more time. Yeah. It's very satisfying. It almost sounds like it's like on an auto tune as well, but I know that I don't think.
Yeah, it almost sounds out of place to me.
Now it does.
Dagobah, but because everything, the other note that I said is for this upcoming part is that everything on Dagobah sounds wet.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which I don't mean in terms of signal like the reverb, but there's also a lot of reverb. But I just mean that everything squishes when you touch it.
I think it's wet in like every sense. I feel like it's wet all around. Yeah, I have been noting that as well and thinking like, well, it is a swamp, a bog. It seems like a wet place. There is thunder sound, so maybe it rains. And maybe it is wet. I don't know why it would be so echoey though, but yeah, it is very squishy for sure. Dagobah is squishy. Okay, I'll continue playing now.
Let's hear it.
Hear those birds. So much wetness. So here, Yoda is strapped to Luke's back.
Run! Yes, Jedi strength flows from the Force. But beware of the dark side. Anger, fear, aggression. The dark side of the Force are they. Easily they flow, quick to join you in a fight. If once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Consume you it will, as it did Obi-Wan's apprentice.
Vader. Is the dark side stronger?
No, no, no. Quicker.
There's that again.
Uh-huh. Okay, so it's just some
It's
animal
it's an
that lives on
animal,
this
yeah.
planet.
So
If it happens once, it could be a mistake. If it happens
it's
twice,
yeah.
it's just an animal on this
well, if it-
planet. It's just the way Dagobah is.
Now I want to see what this animal looks like. I have that desire now. I hope it's a very cute little lizard with like a long body and maybe like a frill.
Could you give me 2 seconds?
Yes.
Okay, so I actually have a book called The Wildlife of Star Wars: A Field Guide by Terrell Whitlatch and Bob Carrow.
What?
And so Terrell Whitlatch is the designed most of the alien species for Episode 1. So all of the Naboo wildlife and everything was largely her designs. And I know that she also did some work for the dewbacks in what's it called? In the special edition.
Oh, okay.
In the special
Yeah.
edition of
Attack of the Clones.
A New Hope. No,
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a whole chapter on Dagobah wildlife, and this is some of my favorite stuff. So this is the giant. This
Looks
way.
like a giant
The
slug.
giant swamp slug, and it has all their anatomy and their weird adaptations for living, and dragon snakes, and she has a whole bunch of different kinds of dragon snake that live in different areas of Dagobah. This is one of my favorite books in the whole world. And the spotlight sloth, and the blitcher bug, and the knobby white spider, which comes from
Whoa, that
McCrory
looks
artwork.
like tree. Those are some thick spider legs.
Yeah, so her. Sorry, I'm going to get into this for just a second.
I'm fascinated.
So these spiders became the
ones in the Mandalorian.
right. So on Dagobah, the lore, and this is no longer canon, but I bet they would still do this. The spiders are actually an early life stage of the trees that grow on Dagobah.
What?
Sorry, I got
That's really exciting.
paper. Yeah, so I won't spend too long on this, but then she illustrates
that's
the the different layers of the canopy
wow.
and undergrowth and swamp.
Wow. The Umbra. Oh my gosh.
So somewhere in here, one of these animals has got to be the one. Maybe it is the leaf tail, or the lesser bogwing, or the spade-headed smooka.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that if only that book had like it'd be cool if that book were a collaborative effort where there'd be like buttons next to each of them. You could press to hear their sound.
Yes, that would certainly elevate it yet another level in my esteem.
What a cool book. Wow. I didn't know it existed. That's wonderful.
I found out that it existed and then paid too much money to buy one.
It does look like an expensive book.
Yeah.
Well, if I find a link, I'll put it in the show notes if people are interested in that. Okay, I will continue playing. First of all, the no music vibe. I like it. What do you think?
I think it works really well, and it does give us. I think it helps to communicate a sense of this being a natural world. By emphasizing, instead of emphasizing the music and how the characters are emotionally feeling, which is kind of what I think the score does primarily, it emphasizes the way that this place sounds. as a place, and so it kind of emphasizes all of the animal sounds and all of the hisses and chirps and growls and calls and everything, and squishy.
I agree. I think it also makes it more uncertain. Like, I think it sets up the next part to be scarier. I think the music the music tends to take care of us. And I feel like, I don't know, just listening to like this, it's not that I wouldn't take what Yoda is saying seriously, but I would be more like, I don't know, oh, this is a cute magical lesson. It's like all a fantasy. I don't know, not a fantasy, but like a little less perhaps serious than just the squawks and the sounds of Dagobah, combined with like this stuff.
Yes, Jedi strength flows from the Force. But beware of the dark side. Anger, fear, aggression. The dark side of the Force are they. Easily they flow, quick to join you in a fight. If once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Consume you it will, as it did Obi-Wan's apprentice.
The story sounds more like, I don't know, everything sounds scarier to me, or not necessarily scarier, but it kind of reminds me of like, this would be like the original Grimm's fairy tale versus like perhaps the Disney retelling of the Grimm's fairy tale. This feels more like the original version. If it had music, it would be sort of like a slightly more for children version, or like,
Yeah. So something that I wanted to note about, or I have a few notes about Yoda's words here. One is that most of it is straightforward English, which we don't think of Yoda as speaking all the time. He says, "A Jedi's strength flows from the Force," and I think that it's interesting what people's conception of what Yoda sounds like is versus the way that he sounds in The Empire Strikes Back.
That's a good point.
But then I am sorry. I'm checking my notes to see how I wanted to phrase this. I am a quietly religious person, and something that I've come to recognize is that some of Yoda's teachings to Luke on Dagobah give me what I consider religious feelings. When I consider, like, when I feel his words in a different way than just lore, like,
yeah. Do you feel like it's sort of like he's talking about the devil almost?
I
Like
don't know if
temptation and stuff like that.
I don't know if I would go that far, but that certainly he's speaking to something that connects with me, at least on some human experience level. That especially when he says, first off, I think it's interesting. He says that the anger, fear, and aggression are the dark side of the Force. And I think that's an interesting comparison with
leading
fear
to the dark side.
leads to the dark side of the Force.
Yeah.
But he says they flow easily, quick to join you in a fight, but they will consume you. And so I think about like how anger and aggression feel useful in certain scenarios, like if you're fighting somebody, but if you let those things
fuel
like
you?
or like determine your choices, you know?
Mm-hmm.
If you let your choices be determined by your anger and aggression, then very quickly you at least as Yoda puts it, it will dominate your destiny and consume you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that probably speaks to things that, you know, George Lucas is aiming these at children and wants to convey meaningful lessons,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I think that these things actually did stick with me a lot, and I think that's probably part of why it feels religious to me.
I can see that. I feel really connected to Yoda's and I guess by extension, like other Jedi, especially in the prequels, Force teachings. Or I'm always very interested when there's a Force discussion or there's talk about the dark side and the light side and the different components, or, you know, the different feelings and the different ways that, you know, fear, aggression, anger can be used. And I've also read a lot of the novels that deal with like Sith characters and um, I guess people who are learning how to channel the dark side. And I feel like um, all of that stuff really speaks to me because it feels very close to home. And I mean, I've always been very interested in the Force. So like, I don't know if it's also just because I have been familiar with Yoda my whole life and been able to like recite Yoda's lines that I have also really feel these things very deeply. Um, um, I feel like I, as a human being, I can see how I could easily fall to the dark side in Star Wars land. And I think that's what makes me kind of like obsessed with thinking about the dark side and why I'm sort of quick to why I feel the need to like jump into lots of conversations about the Force because I feel like when it is discussed in a way that's like dark side is them, light side is us, I kind of feel like I almost feel like I can't have a serious conversation with someone about the Force until we both realize that dark side is not them. Dark side is also very close to us or us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's kind of undergirds this whole scene as it plays out. Because Luke's next question is the dark side stronger? Which I think about that from like again, because the music is not guiding us at all. I wonder, is he thinking like, I want to be powerful, and like I need to check, is the dark side stronger though? Like, should I be learning the dark side just as
okay. I don't interpret it that way.
I don't think that that's his primary motivation. I think that he's maybe more scared
I think so.
of it, that he's like, okay, but is Darth Vader gonna kill me?
Right. Are you teaching me a tool that's just not as good?
Right, because you're making the dark side sound really powerful and quick to join you in a fight, and it's like, I think I might have to fight later. I've been, we're in a war. So and he was looking for Yoda as a great warrior. So like, I think that there is some concern about like, are we going to win?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we going to win? Am I going to lose? And and that Yoda does say, no, it's not stronger. It's just easier
and more seductive, which also really hits me. Like I feel like I'm like, I get it. I know. I think it's a good question that Luke asks, and it's a good way that Yoda answers. Like I feel like a lot of ground is covered in this short conversation. And I agree that there always is this sort of um, thing that a lot of Star Wars fans and Star Wars characters know in the back of their head, which is that like the dark side can manifest in a more uh, aggressive, strong warrior. It can, for sure. It can. And the dark side can be strong. Like if you're thinking about it in a certain way, the dark side can be stronger. It's more immediate. It can be more like potent, immediately dangerous. Also because it is also reactive a lot of the time, or drawing from things that are easier to channel. Like I feel like it's easier to channel anger than it is to channel to peace or whatever.
Right.
Exactly what Yoda says. It's quicker and easier and more seductive. And if you don't have a trained mind, it is easier to use the dark side. And just like in daily life, it's easier to do the things that are habitual for me. It's easier to go for low hanging fruit. It's easier to give into certain emotions and not like interrogate and meditate and like do all those other types of things. I can very easily see how it would be for sure the quote unquote dark side, whatever that represents to an individual person, is quicker, easier, more seductive. It's the path of least resistance for many.
And then Luke asks, but why can't I? And I want to know what he was actually going to ask. Because Yoda says, there is no why, and nothing more will I teach you today.
He's like, lesson's over.
And
well, not lessons over. More like it's time for you to see.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. He says, nothing more will I teach you today. And then secretly, there's probably a secret emphasis on nothing more will I teach you today. You're going to still learn things.
Oh, yes.
As the scene goes on, but...
Yeah, we're going to get the sort of payoff to his line earlier, which was, he's like, I'm not afraid. And he's like, you will be. You will be.
Uh-huh.
Now, I'm curious what he would have said there, too. Let's listen back to see if we can hear more of the wording and
No, quick to join you in a fight. If once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Consume you it will, as it did Obi-Wan's apprentice.
Vader, is the dark side stronger?
No. Quicker, easier, more seductive.
But how am I to know the good side from the bad?
You will know.
Good question.
When you are calm, at peace, passive. A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
But tell me why I can't...
No, there is no why. Nothing more will I teach you today.
Yeah, what do you say? What do you have said? I feel like Yoda's answer is a little bit unsatisfying, but not that I don't know how he could have given a satisfying answer. Like a lot of these Jedi teachings are unsatisfying answers but they're repeated so often that when the apprentice, Padawan or whatever finally feels it, then they get it. And I feel like it's okay to have unsatisfying answers that become like experientially felt, aren't necessarily a bad thing. But I can see how Luke would have questions. You will know when you're calm, at peace, passive. That's not like an immediate. It's hard to notice when you're passive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think part of the reason that Yoda, I used to think that maybe Yoda is not being a very good teacher by refusing to answer why questions, because I feel like that's a sign of a good teacher is answering that kind of question specifically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think what he's getting at is that that kind of asking why will not bring Luke the understanding that he's trying to get to, because he just told him you need to be at peace and passive, and why is not a passive
Right.
attitude to have. And he's saying, no, I just told you.
Yeah, that's kind of I feel Luke in this moment because it is sort of like a painful, annoying, frustrating truth or just aspect of just knowing what would be good on my own personal mental health journey is I ask a lot of questions and I love when people answer them and just however, I also know that there's like an aspect of me that will not be able to find a certain type of peace if I have to be satiated with answers. So I have to also, in a way, find a way to be okay with not being able to have my questions answered.
Yeah,
And
I've
yeah,
definitely found with like I relate to Luke in that I really, really struggle with guided meditation
yeah,
because
I do too.
I am resistant or want to ask questions about every step of the way and just like, okay, like, you're feeling relaxed. And it's like, you don't know me,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, for sure. I get so
And
frustrated.
I think that again, looking at this scene as a religious text, the story of Luke, there's an element of like if this scene, if we read this scene as if it is supposed to teach a moral lesson, I think that it's all the more effective because I and my 12-year-old and my 6-year-old and my 4-year-old self all related to Luke much more in this scene than to Yoda.
Well, yeah.
You know, that he's being put in a challenging position that challenges me to think about it and to think why is Luke framed as wrong in this moment when it's exactly what I would do, you know? Am I wrong then? You know?
Yeah. I truly can't remember whether I related to Luke, though in moments where there's like two characters and when there are when there are limited options, then I think it's easier for me to relate to one more than the other. And in this case, Luke would definitely be it. I think for the vast majority of people watching this, or watching The Empire Strikes Back, I mean, would probably in this moment relate to Luke more, unless you are perhaps a spiritual leader or like a teacher or just someone in a position more like Yoda. Um, what Yoda, like, I can't help but as I'm watching Yoda and Luke interact, I'm thinking of sort of a parallel of Sidious and Anakin interacting. And I'm thinking about how differently those interactions go. And like Yoda, it's interesting because for example here I almost feel like Yoda is like, have you heard the tragedy of Darth Vader the impetuous, or so, like I feel like this is like almost like the opera scene in Revenge of the Sith kind of where, well, okay, we have these two characters. One of them went straight shot to the dark side. One of them frustratingly, and it was a hard road, but stuck to the light side and whatever, became a powerful Jedi who saved the galaxy, whatever. So Luke and Anakin. So Luke talking to his mentor, Yoda, he is not really getting his questions answered. He is being disciplined in a way that feels unsatisfying. He is being taught lessons experientially, being sent into this tree. He's not having his like impetuous desires, his need for curiosity. He's not having his curiosity satiated immediately. compare that to Anakin talking to Sidious or, Palpatine. He is basically all of the things that the Jedi, the Council, and whatever, all the questions that they won't answer. Like, basically, he is giving him all the answers. Palpatine is satiating him, feeding his quest for knowledge, rather than disciplining him. He's like doing the opposite. He's enabling him to do whatever and to go deeper into his, his impetuous feelings. Like, he's sort of stoking that more. Luke
Right.
is Anakin's son. Maybe Luke could have also been stirred up to be more, I guess if we sort of kind of swapped them, like, I don't know, I'm not one to think that like the super heavy-handed, like moralistic teacher who doesn't answer questions is like always the best. But it is interesting to compare these like parallels, right? I mean, I guess no extreme is going to be good, but Palpatine certainly did not instill any discipline in Anakin, and was sort of Anakin's outlet to have all of his questions answered.
Right. Yeah, I also wonder if Luke will. I guess, is Luke just scared of the dark side in a way that Anakin never was? You know, in because I mean, maybe Anakin was scared of the dark side though, because Darth Maul killed Qui-Gon Jinn. So I don't know.
But I feel like Anakin, it's different, right? Because Luke didn't grow up with a community of people talking about Jedi and Sith. He doesn't really, the light side, the dark side. These are sort of newer concepts to him. Period. Anakin is more like, I almost want to say it has more to do with the nature of the dark side and the way that Palpatine and any sort of dark side teacher, there is nothing that what would they try to like, there is disciplining involved in training Sith. That's for sure, at least according to legends and Old Republic books, whatever. But the dark side, the nature of it is it's almost too good to be true. It's very seductive. So Anakin's whole life is the light side, where everyone's like not willing to talk about the dark side. And here he's kind of only hearing really good things about the dark side from a mentor that he trusts. So I don't know, the manipulation.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very different scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, I think there is just something like, I think there's a lot of critique of Yoda that has come up in the last 5 years, 10 years. I don't know. Super valid criticism of the prequel era Jedi Council. Absolutely, for sure. I have felt that forever. But I also feel like there is an aspect of it going further than I actually feel. I don't actually feel Yoda is the enemy. I don't feel like Yoda is to be blamed for like all of the bad stuff that happened. I feel like ideally you wouldn't rely on one mentor. There would be different people with different sort of styles and whatever. And Yoda could be the one that is like this. Someone like Qui-Gon could be one that answers more questions or different. This is what happens when all the responsibility is relying on like one or two people to pass on the whole thing. That's a bit much. But I do sort of feel like the idea of Jedi having discipline on a different level than, I guess, the average person in the universe is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, including extra restrictions. I think that's okay.
I think I actually agree with you on that. That some of the criticism goes further than I would personally.
Like what kind of the criticism?
Oh, like there are those who would say that the Jedi Order is the or a bad guy in the
Yeah.
prequels, and I don't agree with that. I think that the Jedi Order are the good guys, and they are fatally flawed.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. The Force is one thing, and the different ways that different groups, sects of people, communities, eras, whatever, wield the Force, they're going to be different. But whenever you try to codify something and make it into an organization, a thing, that thing is something separate, related to, but separate from the Force. It's never going to be like a pure thing. It's a thing. It's like a separate thing. It's an organization.
right? It's an institution that
It's an
has
institution.
uh, real practical concerns that go beyond the truth of the universe. Like,
Right.
yeah, like they have to figure out what their role is in this war that's happening, and
Yeah.
not which has very little to do with what is the definition of balance in the Force,
Right.
you know, which is
Or what
which is
level
more
of
of the
attachment is
truth.
appropriate. Like there is no truth to that. To the no
Right.
attachments, even. There is no like universal like Jedi should be allowed to have attachments. Attachments are good. Love is good. It's like none of these things are. These are all very contextual definitions. Yeah.
And it may be that the having an institution requires you to come up with answers to a lot of questions that are maybe beyond the scope of the purpose of the institution, but that fall into the purview of the institution. I don't know.
I mean,
I'm
I feel
not
like
sure
the
if I'm
rule.
using
I feel
those
like the
words right.
rules are like best attempts, or like to look at them as favorably as possible. Like they are attempts. They're to see if it will make everything run more smoothly, which is why things like the Constitution or whatever can be amended and whatever rules can change, but having some sort of a structure and some sort of tenets is, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's there. They might be good for some people, bad for other people. They might need to be. They should probably be reevaluated. But yeah, there is no universal like the Jedi are bad because they don't let people have attachments, and that's bad. But that's a whole spiel for me.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, yeah. I have made some people mad online with my opinions on no attachments. So I'll just leave it at that. Okay, let's continue.
Clear your mind of question.
R2.
So, right there, we get one of a few phrases that R2D2 says from time to time.
Is it the?
And- Yeah,
Yeah, that's good.
and it's sort of, to me, it reads as like, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" Some of the time, but other times it's like, "I'm worried about this place." Yeah.
I like the way you interpreted that. To me, it's sort of like, check this out. Like it's like a little bit of a like
Oh, interesting.
look at this, or like, what are we? It's sort of like calling attention. It's not too unlike, are we all right? It's like a kind of like a vibe check in a way.
Yeah, yes, it's definitely a vibe check of some kind. Like, I am feeling. How's everybody else feeling about this place that we're in right now? Because seems weird.
And then it's afterward. I feel like he's sort of weighing in what he thinks. So let's see. Actually, let's go back a little bit. Like first he does it twice. So it's like, what is this? Let's escalate it a little bit. And it's slightly higher pitched the second time. It's like, in case you didn't hear me, this is spooky, maybe. And then he kind of does like a descending chirp.
Yeah.
So. Even higher. And it's sort of like, I can almost imagine him like if he had a neck looking down. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then that leads into the beginning of the magic tree. 6M5 /7M1. And this is on some soundtracks as the magic tree, or I think on the original soundtrack, I think it's called the magic tree. But then, like I mentioned earlier, it is also tagged on to the end of, it's also tagged onto the same track as the cut training montage. Training of a Jedi Knight / the magic tree is what it is on one of the albums.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the original. But yeah. All right, I guess we should just get into it. The dialogue, there's very little dialogue left.
There's something not right here. I feel cold.
That place is strong. But the dark side of the Force, a domain of evil it is. And you must go.
What's in there?
Only what you take with you. Your weapons. You will not need them.
Main theme. And it is in major, but it sounds creepy because of other stuff going on around it, which we will talk about it in more detail. All right, let's stop there for a second.
Yeah.
There's no more dialogue after this. It's all music and the visual.
Yeah, so another line I never heard is Luke's whispered word death after he says, "I feel cold." I didn't notice that until it was subtitled on some version of it that I watched, and I thought, whoa, wait. And I had to actually rewind because I had never heard him whisper death after he says, "There's something not right. I feel cold. Death."
Oh, interesting. I mean, let's play that again. I mean, I definitely do hear it, but I don't know when I first heard it.
Yeah. I think we didn't.
Oh wait, it's way. What am I? I'm on the wrong minute. I meant to be a minute ahead. A minute before then. Okay.
There's something not right here.
Okay, it's coming up.
I feel cold.
That place
Yeah, it is very soft.
is strong.
It's like, I feel cold. Death at that place is strong.
Yeah, and it lines up much closer with what Yoda says and Yoda's tone of voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I just and I guess it gets mixed in with all of the various animal sounds on Dagobah.
Yeah. The animal sounds are a good companion to this track, for sure.
Yeah. I also noted that the low bass that comes in here for the starting the creepy sound, accompanied with the very high strings,
Mm-hmm.
is, from what I understand, a pretty cliche horror soundtrack writing, based on the notion that big things sound deep and small things sound high, and so by pairing the two together, your brain doesn't know which one, which thing to react to. Is it safe or is it unsafe? Is there danger or no danger? And I don't know if that's true, but it's certainly motivated.
It certainly is a common thing to do in music and in scoring, but I don't know if it were all low or all high. I don't think either one would signify safety. I think both of those extremes,
Mhm.
even alone, would already be enough for danger. So having them together amplifies that.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, but I have heard that, and yeah,
I'm gonna play from
glad to
the
hear your thoughts.
yeah. I'm gonna play since there's no since there's very little dialogue. Just to focus on the music better, I'm gonna start playing from just the track without the dialogue. So already the way that it's starting is a very high pitched, like glissando up on the strings. Like there's, first of all, it's muted. So, and it's like, and it's happening in like all of it's like the strings, it's like at least eight different string voices are stacked. So it's sort of, I guess you could say they're planing in a way, but the pitches aren't specific in a glissando. It's just like maybe the starting pitch and the ending pitch are notated, but you could just slide up, without being too worried about hitting certain notes at certain beats. So it's kind of like that sort of thing.
Right. Sort of in effect more than
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a lot of this piece, a lot of this cue are very effect-y.
There's also a woodwind line right toward the beginning there that
Yeah. Do you mean the
reminds me.
clarinets?
Yes, it is. Okay, it is clarinets. Reminds me of a similar motion for similar purpose in the introductory scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's much more prominent there, but it's very short here. But it's kind of, I think it might be a ascending diminished chord. The sort of doodle.
I wish I knew Raiders
plays
better.
one.
Okay. I'll show you what that opening is once I resize this thing that I have put on my screen. Yikes. Okay. If you're watching, I have some notation on screen here. Clarinet's opening. I guess there are a few different ways that I could look at it. I don't know which way is like I don't know. I don't know which way is the most correct, if there is such a thing. I'm interested for when Dominic Sewell puts his analysis out, which will probably be out by the time this episode is out. I'm curious how he conceives of this, but I mean, I'm hearing, or basically, and then, so in the, so we have a minor third and then another minor third. If you stacked all of the notes together on top of one another, you'd have an E flat major with a B flat augmented. Oh no. Which I should have.
E flat major minor 6.
There you go.
Right?
And I guess the other way that I was also kind of, I don't know, I was just kind of like putting the notes, you know, just thinking of different ways to order the notes, because that's what a lot of analysis is like kind of putting things in stacking things in different ways. And yeah, I do hear this like.
And it's specifically what it reminds me of is the tone of the clarinets when doing that particular movement. And
what about the tone?
There's sounds that are, I guess, overtones that come up when clarinets make these kinds of jumps. That I think it might actually be in the movement of the notes rather than in the target pitches. That I'm hearing that
like open notes.
It just, yeah.
I don't know enough about clarinet to say for sure that they're like open, but they might be, because I know what you mean. It is a very like pure tone almost.
Well, and there's almost a squeaking. That's not the right word, but when they're changing the notes, and it might be because of how big of jumps they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I tend to hear it more for clarinet, and it's a sound that I like.
I think what strikes me about them is that even though it almost feels, the opening of this sounds like a musical to me, and like the beginning of some number. I feel like that clarinet opening is sort of more, I don't know, quote unquote normal sounding than the rest of this is going to sound. Almost. It almost sounds, it's not like a dominant seventh thing, but it almost reminds me of like just like a dominant seventh preparation, where like if you're gonna do something in like here, it almost is like, it's not that, but like it gives me a similar vibe at least, where it's like, all right, let's do this. It's not that, but like, just something about the way that it's moving up reminds me of that. Yeah, it's like a creepier version of that to me, I guess. And then we have this. D, where it's holding that A for a while, fortifying it with the harp pluck. Pluck. Let's do that again. Again, the opening of Mariiiia. That's what I always hear when I hear that. Mariiiia, I just met a girl named Mariiiia.
Yeah. It's is that the sharp 4 or flat 5 or whichever one you want to call it?
Well, it's going from A, D sharp, E. So there is a tritone.
Yeah, so
Right
so it
there.
starts on the tritone and then resolves up to a 5.
E. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this could also, you could also think of this as a, let me put my screen back on. You could also think of this as, all right, so okay, this is treble clef in C. So if we're starting on A, this is A, and then we're going to D sharp, and then we're going to E.
E is off screen.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. A to D sharp to E. You could also, okay. O, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, O, 4, 5, but then you put it in prime form and it basically, you get an 016 pitch class set. And this pitch class set, 016, so putting it in normal order just means like putting it in an order of smallest intervals at first. So 016 would actually be, you would reorder it. So it would be the O, you would give it the D sharp would be the 0. And then the 1 would be the E. And then the 6 would be the A. Because in pitch classes, it doesn't matter what octave you're in. Because a pitch class, this A will be the same pitch class, whether you're, regardless of the octave you're in. So here, this is more appropriate, 0, 1, 6. But of course, it's in a different order here. Yep, struggling to get it on screen. But anyway, this 016 interval, or this 016 pitch class set is, I feel like I've talked about it on the podcast a couple times, and it's known as the Viennese trichord. It is present, I know I for sure, okay, if you want to hear more of an explanation of this, listen to the season finale of A New Hope season, because we also talked about the Viennese trichord there and also compared it to when it pops up in, I think, the Nazi motif in Indiana Jones. But it's one of those things that I think I always pick up on it because of West Side Story, because it is the Mariiiia. And,
and in the reordered form, it's part of I can't remember the title of the song, but it's his. But the reordered form, starting on the D sharp.
Yeah, the prime form.
Yeah, the prime form. It's da 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 da.
Oh yeah,
it's
totally.
I think
yeah,
it's,
see, it's
like
throughout
the
so
DNA of West Side Story.
Yes.
Totally.
yeah. For sure. It's also in the Book of Boba Fett in the twins in the Hutts, the Hutt twins when they come out. Okay, so that's that. Let's continue. I'll also put on screen this sort of waveform visual of the track, so you can see how, oh my god, it's like forever plagued by this like resizing thing. How at the beginning, we're at the beginning stages right now, where it is still small compared to where it's going to end up. So here's the sort of waveform view of this cue. I'll take off my notes. So yeah, right now we are about right. I mean, we're still at the beginning. So yeah, really toward the beginning of it, where it's still small. Yeah, you see where it gets big. Yeah. It's almost like a response.
Was that low woodwinds there?
Yeah.
the do-do-do-do.
Yeah, and that is sort of like I guess it's like a repeated sort of figure where it's like the chromatic descent, the dee dee dee. Yeah, I don't know exactly which one you were talking about, but there was like I think you may have been thinking of the bass clarinet.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of good like low woodwinds. Right there.
Right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Dee dee dee. This is such a complicated part. That's such an interesting part. Because we have the main theme, but there's all this stuff around it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not exactly reharmonized. It's just because everything else becomes almost noise around it. And so it still sounds major to me,
Mm-hmm.
but it does it's surrounded by danger, you know.
Yeah, that's how I see it too. And I think it's metaphorically really, I don't know, kind of amazing there, because especially knowing that later on when Luke sees his face, we're going to hear his theme in minor. But here, even though he's in danger, it's not like we're jumping straight away to his theme in minor. It's like Luke is still intact at this point.
Yeah.
But around him is things are a little bit off. But you still, the spirit of Luke is still fine at this right now, as of now.
Mhm.
And above it, the sort of the upper woodwinds are kind of, it's a very delicate palette, like, right? Like it's sort of,
Mhm.
it's light, it's soft, it's, just in thirds, like just, if there were like an isolated thing of just the flutes, like don't listen to the strings right now, but just, I'll go. That dee almost reminds me of dee. I don't think it's
Yeah.
intentional, but it just does remind me of that. Yeah. Okay, so while the horns are, or solo horn, I guess, doing just the, also the violins are doing this. Not only is it glissando, like we already heard at the beginning, where it was gliding up, we're combining techniques now. We're combining creepy string techniques here. So it's also artificial harmonic. So, which we have talked about
okay.
on this season already. So it's like, that's how you get it. So it's this very creepy, like,
Mhm.
yeah, slidey thing. And then it kind of just goes, I don't know the exact notes, but it's like it goes up and then it kind of slides down really softly. And so, yeah, it kind of gives like a scratchy feeling as well to this section. It's like three distinct ideas. We have like the upper woodwinds, they're little dainty. We have this scratchy, like violins doing a completely different creepy thing. And then we have Luke in the middle, still pushing through it, still the main, I still pushing through the melody, but
Yeah.
it's just, there's so much around it. All right. So Yoda's like, your weapons, you will not need them. There we have that descending.
So, yeah, that's kind of the main motif of the right at the end there is kind of the
that.
yeah. I'm not sure where else if it appears anywhere but this cue or this cue and the next cue, depending on how you slice it. I don't know. But the da da da
Yeah.
is kind of the core
Mm-hmm.
cell, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It definitely is a repeated thing, and especially later we'll hear it even more. At this point, it's D, E, D. Now, I feel like this may be the dark side motif, or it may be related to the dark side motif, which
Uh-huh.
it doesn't quite sound like we're used to hearing the dark side motif. But let me actually play you a more typical version of the dark side motif, which we have just heard in Solo and the Princess in the previous set of minutes. So. See, it's that whole step. So I think it's related. Because here it's also
it feels definitely related, yeah.
Yeah, and what tips the scale for me is that this is clearly the dark side motif. Thematically would make sense to be all over this. So yeah.
Right.
So yeah. It's the same notes. It's just orchestrated. It's just like arranged differently. But yeah, I think they're the same. And before then, we kind of like have, after the violins do their glissando up, we then have a different, sort of a different string technique called a tremolo. And that is also used to great effect, and it's climbing up. Right here. I'll start over earlier. So it's that really fast oscillation with the bow. Yeah. We also have more of those woodwinds doing more delicate stuff.
Right.
Which that part reminds me of Peter and the Wolf. Are you familiar?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's see. Right here. And the part that it reminds me of is, I'm going to actually play a flute excerpt from Peter and the Wolf. The part that I guess it's the rhythm. It's definitely like the notes themselves don't remind me of it. It's more of the flute sound. It's the grace note especially, and the grace note is that quick little note before, quick little note at the beginning. The dee. Yeah, it's like a little, I don't know, grace note. I don't know how else to describe it metaphorically. It's not really like a hiccup because it kind of goes right into it, but it can sound kind of like a hiccup, I suppose. Okay, guess we can keep moving on. Kind of backtracking a little bit. Let's see. The dark side motif. So here, we're right here, low reeds. And now we're about to get to This is the string swarm. I'm sure there's lots to discuss on the way to where we have gotten.
Yeah. Can we run through this section with the
Dialogue with the sound effects?
sound effects?
Definitely, for sure.
Because I wanted to contrast this section with the animal sounds in this section against the animal sounds in the training section.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. So just finding the spot. All right. Dark side motif. Should I keep playing or?
just a moment longer, I think. There just end up being a whole bunch more specifically sort of growling noises
Yeah.
as opposed to the former
The high pitched, kind
you
of
know.
trilly, squawky.
And they also feel much more immediate rather than distant in the mix.
Yeah.
They're all like very close. There's things that are upset either that you're here or they were upset before you got here.
I would agree with that.
And I had never noticed that very intentional contrast that I'm sure if you're a sound designer, you're thinking about that all the time. Like, how do I show that this is a new place or that there's a new emotion going on?
Yeah, that is like a very yeah, that's a clever way of heightening the sense of danger by changing by showing a new, by I guess uncovering new layers of the world that you've already been establishing. And it works well with the scene. Like Luke is kind of going deeper and deeper into the cave, kind of like pushing aside, hanging vines, and then he like kind of, it looks like he goes down into a hole of some sort.
Yeah.
And so the further he goes, sort of, this also reminds me of like Alice in Wonderland, when Alice is kind of going through the forest. Disclaimer, I'm thinking I'm not necessarily thinking of the movie, I'm thinking of the ride at Disneyland, but that's based on the movie. So I know that like she's kind of like in the forest and she hears all these like owls and these like kind of creepy animals, and she sees the Cheshire cat, and it's like there's the flowers are talking, like there's like all this stuff around her. Yeah, it almost sounds like there's a caterwaul, or something that reminds me of like when cats yowl, like in heat, or
I'm guessing that that's some of the raccoons trapped in a bathtub.
Oh, good point. Knew they had to come up somewhere.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet that we're hearing a lot of raccoons that don't want to be in a bathtub.
Poor things. Oh my gosh. I think before then we hear a really big one. Like, and here, yeah.
Yeah, so that sounds like I feel like that's a pitched down version
Yep.
of probably same sounds that we're hearing.
Mm.
And I think one of those is definitely dubbed onto some kind of lizard in the scene. But, like there's a lizard that opened its mouth, and Ben Burtt made it more otherworldly by because there's a lot of real world animals throughout Dagobah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's just fun. There's just normal snakes and normal lizards and
Now, is that lizard in your wildlife book?
ooh, that's a good question.
Do you remember what it looks like?
Yeah, I do remember what it looks like. This is Naboo. Okay. Let me see.
While you're finding that, I'll also mention that in this scene, we also do cut away briefly to Artoo and Yoda, where Yoda shakes his head and Artoo does like a little wobble beep, and then we.
Oh yeah, he does one that's. I wrote down. R2 does an alarm sound, right toward the beginning of this, or sometime during this, and it is one that I transcribed in our previous episode. That's the first thing that he says.
Is it the same one?
It's. I don't know if it's exactly the same recording, but it's again one of those phrases that R2D2 uses. It's the.
You're talking about in A New Hope with the Jawa sandcrawler.
Well, he says it. He says it just before when C-3PO is walking away from him.
Mm-hmm.
He says that to get C-3PO's attention. So I wrote it down as R2 alarm sound.
Okay, let's listen.
He's
I
like,
think I know where it is.
I don't like that.
It's that.
Right there. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like very zappy. Yeah. That is part of his repertoire.
I don't see.
It's not
I don't
in the
see
book.
the lizard in the book. Yeah.
So I guess I'll have to pay more attention to notice the sound being matched to the on-screen lizard, because that's cool. Now we're entering this string swarming section, which sounds a little bit like this. Here. You'll hear
Yeah.
and that will become even more relevant later when we hear the synthesizer. But it's really like, it's called a portamento. It's similar to a glissando, and it's just a little slide. So it's like. It's almost like a super wide vibrato, but it's just, there's a tiny slide, and it's not like a big one. It's not like, it's just. And it's stacked, so it sounds swarmy because some parts are doing, and some are doing, and some are doing, like some are like. So they're all kind of in close proximity, but kind of sliding in slightly different directions. So it has this overall like swarmy feeling where it is like constantly sliding, but it's not like it's sliding it's
Without a destination.
yeah, and you probably like I pick out the top violin pitch, but it's not like overall like oh it's a clear pitch they're trying. It's like clear chords or something.
Hmm.
Later on, we're going to hear when the synthesizer comes in. We'll hear a similar sort of slidey type of thing, oscillating pitch, or like a yeah. So out of the swarming is a clarinet to piccolo line is birthed.
Okay, that one is very Raiders of the Lost Ark opening few minutes.
The piccolo, the whole thing.
The clarinet and piccolo. I think that he does a similar trading off between woodwind instruments for similar effect in a similarly spooky jungle context. I think it'll be worth comparison.
Do you have?
Yeah.
Is it just the opening of Indiana Jones?
Yeah, it's the first track. I don't know if I don't have
Do you know
like
what the
a
track is
second.
called?
I
Indiana Jones
don't know.
opening. Opening track. Because I feel like, well, what's happening is
Main title, South America, 1936.
oh, okay. Main title, South America.
South America.
Okay. It's cool use of percussion.
So it's in this wandering clarinet line. Eventually, I think it does a trade-off.
Oh, that. Whoa. I'm not going to be satisfied until I hear it now.
I'm really scared it's not in here.
Don't be scared. I mean, it is interesting to. There are certainly similarities. See, we have very high pitched strings sliding up. Now this one's a lot more percussive, which makes
That's
sense,
true, yeah.
giving South America.
Yeah, lots of wood percussion.
Yeah.
I don't know that the exact moment is.
Okay, we'll listen like 10 more seconds. Or will it? You know,
I think it might be in the first 10 minutes of the film.
Okay.
Is like the span that this could.
All right, link will be in the show notes. That's funny. So here,
Yeah, lots of there were some interesting similarities. Like there were definitely some harmonic or artificial harmonic glissandos
yeah,
in there.
yeah, that is definitely like in the toolbox of things when you're writing a cue like that. I feel like that is one of the things on the list of like, well, have I tried doing a glissando? Have I tried doing it with artificial harmonics? Have I tried? Like there are a number of things that one could try. Let's see. Okay, wait. Let's because okay. Let's see. Oh, the piccolo. When the piccolo comes in and sort of dancing, it's sort of dancing around um, this note. Right. It's sort of like it's basically on an A, but it's also doing grace. It's grace noting, doing the grace notes. Um, and then wet. Speaking of wet things. And then that there again, we have the super high pitched and very low contrast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's leading to there's definitely a crescendo happening there, where first I would say it's a molto crescendo because the way that it builds happens suddenly. So I'll go back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So here, the strings have entered, and then right, so that crescendo happened over maybe one bar or something, and then goes into this ferocious part. And we hear Vader's breathing, of course. Just for greater context, I'll put on screen where that ferocious part has begun, and we are okay. Yeah, right where I have. Let's pick a different color so I can highlight this. Yeah, we're in the waveform. We're here where it's starting to get bigger and more, I guess, jagged. Yeah, so that's where we are right now.
And also enter the synth sound.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And
my question for you, is there anywhere else in Star Wars that has synth like this?
Prior to this, I would think no. I think this might be the first. I think this is the first time, but I think there's also synth in Cloud City.
Oh, interesting.
I might be wrong. I don't think this is the last time there is synth, but it is perhaps the first time. And I didn't even know there was synth in this until last year. Because to me, well, let's keep here listening. Okay, so here. Now I'm curious if listeners can pick out what part the synth part is. And maybe it's easier, maybe this is easier for other people than it was for me. Like I had to have it pointed out to me.
I'll answer for me.
Go ahead.
I may have pointed it out. Was I the one who pointed it out to you?
I'm not sure. I feel like it's come over me. I feel like a lot of people have told me at this point.
I found out about it like last year also.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's funny.
So that's why I ask. Because I had never noticed it. So this is at least one more data point. No, I super didn't notice it until I can't remember what the context was, but it stands out a lot more on I was listening to the soundtrack, I think with headphones, and I noticed it for the first time and was like, whoa, has that always been there?
Yeah, okay. I think it might behoove us to listen to it on the soundtrack now. Listeners, if you still have a moment to decide to guess again for yourself where the synth is, because seriously, it took me a while to notice it. And here we also hear it. I know this is, you know, technically the end of the minutes, I think. Yeah, so the synth is
It
just
goes wah, wah, wah. I think
yeah, it
it's close.
Like,
The last note might not have been right.
like I would have thought it was woodwinds.
Uh-huh.
I think so. I'll go back a little bit. Straight up, I would have thought woodwinds. I can't sing that high. Right, it's those little like tones that are kind of up high. They're kind of pure toned. There's not like vibrato on them yet. Yeah, I thought they were just woodwinds.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a synthesizer, and I think, I mean, I guess I can guess why I didn't really hear it before, and that's probably because I guess when I hear, oh, there's a synth on something, I'm thinking like Mandalorian. I'm thinking like an obvious synth, like a, not that this isn't obvious to some people. I'm sure this is obvious to some people, but it's really embedded in the, for me, in my opinion, texture of what's already going on, to the point where I could mistake it as just an orchestral instrument doing some sort of an interesting technique. Because I think well, acoustic, like orchestral instruments have a huge timbral like variety in what types of tones they can produce. So I don't immediately jump to the conclusion that like a strange orchestral sound is a synth. My immediate conclusion is usually like, oh, like how did an acoustic instrument do that? Because like acoustic instruments can do amazing things. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So the other thing is that the splashing occurs. The big splash sound on the sound effects happens just as Luke like looks on in shock at seeing Darth Vader, and I wonder what the motivation for the big like dunking underwater splash sound is in the scene. Is it because from that moment on they change into the slow motion visuals, the frame by frame sort of look, and is that Vader appearing, or is that Luke being plunged into the metaphorical water of the vision? But it's clearly when the vision starts is that sound effect.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Obviously, I guess. Well, what do you think?
I mean, I don't know. I think that I like the idea of it plunging him into the vision more than I like the idea of Darth Vader bursting out of a pool of water,
Yeah.
which I guess is kind of my other.
Well, here I think it's interesting now that The Last Jedi has come out, and since that had such overt water in that
Mhm.
cave scene, so yeah, I guess I'm now thinking of it like in context, related to Ray's vision, Ray's moment. Um, yeah, it is like it because it's quite a distinct like water splash for sure. But
Uh-huh.
also, it's hard to tell what is going on in that scene, and that scene really freaked me out as a kid. Um,
Mm.
like I don't think I think the whole thing just was so overwhelmingly. s- I didn't know what to make of it, to be honest. Like I didn't really understand that it was supposed to be a vision um, for a while. So I was confused about the scene
Yeah,
and
I
scared.
read it very literally as a kid,
Yeah, exactly. Like,
and which isn't. It's yeah, it's unsettling because it's like, was that real? Did
right,
that really happen?
right. And I think I didn't get the levels of like, well, this is fiction. So like the force and the, all this, a lot of these things are not real. But then this thing is not real in a different way. It's like also not real in the story
Right.
that is not real. Yeah, scary stuff. And the music uh, definitely adds to that. The music and sound design and that water splash. Now,
And
yeah.
another thing that I think is interesting is that when you get the lightsaber sounds and everything,
Mm-hmm.
um, as far as I can tell, those are still at full speed.
The psh,
Yeah,
yeah.
the lightsaber sounds are regular speed while the visuals are slowed down.
Oh,
But the sounds are synchronized to the visuals even though they're slower. And I think that causes a weird disconnect on purpose, like a discomfort, I can't think of the right word.
no, I think there's something
Uh,
to that, like an uncanny something.
yeah, that's kind of incongruous.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even think about that, but I feel like you're probably right. Let's listen to it. Um, okay, lightsaber soon. We'll continue for just a second. It's hard to tell because like they do
It is
sound
hard for me
kind of
to tell.
longer. What was that?
Yeah, I said it does sound hard to tell.
Yeah. It's squishy sounding, the lightsabers. But there's so much noise happening in general. It's very overwhelming there. Uh it doesn't help that like I guess the sense of time there is it's hard to discern time in general. And musically there is that, the sort of dark side motif, the you know, the thing that you said was going to be I guess a motif for this set piece where it's, that whole step. We certainly are hearing a lot of that. Sort of neighboring notes, especially in a second. Right here. The dark side motif. But other than that, like the different sections of the orchestra are like maniacally like running around doing a bunch of stuff. Like the strings are unmetered at this point. They're doing
Mm.
these very fast like first of all the piano is kind of doing like kind of these like runs, these sort of let me. You can't even hear it that well. I guess unless we went to the track. But so the pianos are sort of going brr, 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 and the strings have this like I don't know if dovetailed is the right word necessarily, but it's like, so first of all, I don't know how you would describe what the strings are playing there. It's like frenetic. It's clearly very fast. You can't hear a clear pitch. They're playing repeated things that are very fast, and at least in the live to picture transcription or rendition of the score, the different sections are just instructed to repeat these cells as fast as possible. So actually I sort of written all the string cells down in treble clef, so normalize them for treble clef, because I was trying to see like if there's some sort of like a pitch trend to notice. And so basically each of these cells that you see, that is just what they're repeating over and over. So the cello, is doing this, but then over and over. Violas are doing this, but then over and over. Violin 2 this, and violin 1 this. And they come in at different times. Like the cello comes in first, and then the violas come in second, but the cellos keep on playing. So it's additive. It's not like they're not taking turns.
Are the cellos playing all together, or is each cellist playing like?
It's a good question.
Running through this as quickly as each one can.
So if you saw, it would be the second one, because there's no way you can time that with your whole section. When you see that as your instruction, sort of like repeat as fast as possible, it's every person on their own. There's kind of a lot of minimalist music that works like this too. Like there's a famous one called Terry Riley's In C, and it's comprised, there's different cells that like you basically can repeat different cells at will, but like there's like certain rules, like you have to maybe finish one before you go to the other, or you have to like complete a thing. I can't remember what the exact rules are, so it's not like complete anarchy, but it's like you individually can just move between different cells. And here it's not quite that free, but it's sort of like it's giving you the cell, it's giving you the notes to play, but as long as you're kind of playing all those notes, you can just kind of go as fast as possible. It truly wouldn't matter. No one would be able to tell if you skipped if you skipped a note or whatever, because it's going so fast, and it's like basically. And when I was trying, I was like, oh, maybe they're all playing the same. My first theory was like, oh, they're probably playing the same. They're probably all playing the same pitches in different order, but no. There are some trends of like what they're playing. This is just my little chaotic mapping that I did last night, where you can see the top line, all the notes that the cello is playing. So it's, out of the 12 tones that are in the Western music scale, they're playing all of the tones except for 3, A, B flat, and B. And then the violas are playing almost all the tones except B flat, B, E, and F. And then the second violins are playing all the tones except C, E flat, F, and G flat. So it's like all of the tones are being covered somewhere. There's no notes that are off limits. I would say out of these, the ones that have the least representation would be like B flat. B flat has 3 that are missing that one, and F has 3 that are missing that. So maybe those are perhaps, but either way, there is still F somewhere. So my conclusion to that was like, okay, there's not much of a trend to be discerned from that. I mean, there is.
Right. It's supposed to sound like chaos.
Exactly.
I performed a piece called, I think it's Lux Aeterna.
Okay. I think you've told me about this before.
That is an aleatoric piece of music, which, similar. You repeat this until the next part starts, and then you might come in with specific things to sing, or another, now repeat this until you receive a cue, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think I'm going to try to spell this right. Just if people want to look up this kind of music, I don't know. Tell me if I'm spelling it wrong. Aleatoric music. Well, autocorrect did something, so maybe that is correct. Aleatoric music. I think that's probably right. Aleatoric
That looks
music.
right.
Yeah. So it's music that has like an element of chance in it, where I've played an aleatoric sort of opera that had where I had music and there were cells like, but there was like a timekeeper, like a stop, whatever it's called, counting up, a countdown, a timer, stopwatch, kind of in the back of the theater. And then there was also like almost like a teleprompter style, like kind of flashing random instructions or whatever. It was like an opera. I think it was called A Dice Thrown or something. And basically, like digitally, there was like dice thrown, and that would kind of give the instrumentalists and the singers and the dancers different instructions based on a set of instructions that have already been like rehearsed. It's just sort of like telling you when to do different things. Um, yeah. So yeah, this definitely fits into like the aleatoric thing.
Again, using everything as every effect that you've got in your toolkit.
Yeah, aleatoric. Yeah, they even added synth here. So, yeah, okay. And of course, we have, as we've been mentioning, we have the dark side motif. That. So that high pitch. I'm pretty sure that is also the synth.
Uh-huh.
But I also, again, would never have guessed that because instruments can just slide around like that, as we've already shown many times in this episode. Right. So I don't know. I find it curious. Like I'm not disappointed in it by any means, but I'm just curious why this decision was made. Like I wonder if there was a point in which John Williams is sort of like, oh, I've surpassed the boundaries of what the orchestra can do, because that feels like a not very John Williams-y thing to do. Like I feel like he could have gotten something out of the orchestra if he wanted to. Like and it's not so out of the ordinary. It's like not such an overt synth. It's not like, I don't know. It doesn't have it's that it.
I wonder if it's like just that I want something for this scene that isn't in any other part, you know, that sort of a very subtle, like you said, it doesn't stand out that much, but kind of a subtle clue that we are outside of the normal boundaries of the world, you know, that this is something different because it starts with the vision and then it doesn't much come back.
I think that's actually a good point too, is I guess I shouldn't be expecting something totally different, and these nuances are kind of also what make these things, I don't know, what I appreciate about them is, you know, just because I can't overtly pick it out, that's not to say I'm not feeling that there is a sense of something different, even if I'm, you know, correcting in my brain and attributing it to something that I already assume is there. Yeah, it could be that, like, even if something was just a tiny bit off, that was like enough to warrant it. And I would say the scene itself kind of does that, and the fact that it's sort of like this dream this nightmare, this imagined thing also kind of it's justified. I kind of take back what I said. Not that I ever said it wasn't justified, but still. Yeah. I'm curious what point of the process the decision was made, though.
Yeah. Yeah, and whose suggestion it was,
Yeah.
you know?
Or if it was someone's
'Cause-
suggestion.
Right. Or, I should say whose idea it was.
Yeah. Maybe they
You
had a
know.
sponsorship. It was like this late 70s, right? Maybe some synth was like, hey, put this in your score. And John Williams was like, well, okay, fine. I'll just make it sound like a flute, but sure. Yeah, I'm also curious. And this is going to be a question that I should ask. Okay. Note to self, I need to ask this. I need to ask Chris Malone. Chris, if you're listening, I'm going to ask you this. Do you know anything about, I'm literally writing a note because I don't want to forget this, Chris Malone, who wrote Recording the Star Wars Saga, that amazing document, who knows all about the microphones and the orchestra, all that stuff. Do you know anything about the synth use in Empire Strikes Back? Okay. He's coming on later this season. So, okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm also curious if it was like something that happened during the recording process, sort of like hearing the cue and then being like, this is good, but what can we add to?
Mhm. Yeah, I wonder if it was played live with the orchestra or if it was
Like dubbed.
tracked in after the fact too, because you could.
Yeah, you could, except now that I'm thinking like there's such a clear space in it. It's not like, it doesn't feel like it's replacing, it's not like it was recorded with flutes already.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a good point.
But maybe they did different takes. I don't know. I want to know now. I really do want to know, because these days it would be like super easy, especially if you're striping the orchestra and you're layering things in a more piecemeal way. It would be easier to add and subtract elements. But for something like the 80s or the early 80s, I don't know.
So
yeah.
If you'll permit me, I'd like to say a few words about cave visions and how good they are and how they're the best part of Star Wars.
I would love you to, because I'm also passionate about the subject, and then this will lead well into some Last Jedi comparisons.
Yes. So the thing about dream sequences in movies is that they're usually quite bad. The strength of a dream sequence is that you can show some interiority of what a character is going through psychologically or spiritually or what have you, that you can't, or that would be harder to convey if the audience wasn't like, wait, is this happening right now? Because that's how we experience dreams and stuff, is that it feels real enough while you're dreaming most of the time that but then a weakness of dream sequences is that you necessarily have to kind of rug pull the audience and say, actually, that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what cave visions do functionally for Star Wars is that they take the strengths of a dream sequence and then make it more ambiguously real, because it's not a dream sequence that definitely didn't happen. It's because the Force is real in this world. It's hard to say where the edges of that are. And so you get to have this examination of what's going on with the character. Like the question of, is Luke afraid of the dark side? Is he tempted to go toward the dark side? Is he, all of those things are kind of expressed in, he defeats Darth Vader and then finds his own face behind the mask. And that's actually in the next minutes, but you gave me
That's all right, yeah.
But it's and then with the context of Yoda's words just beforehand, which I think is one of my favorite exchanges in Star Wars, hands down on its own, is what's in there, only what you take with you. And so Luke has taken in all of this stuff. Darth Vader being there is what Luke has taken with him. And then to further the symbolic resonance of all of that, he says, your weapons, you will not need them. And then Luke puts on his weapons anyway and takes his weapons into the cave. And the weapons signify his belief that he will need them, which is, motivated by fear or a practicality of, or a distrust of Yoda. Yoda says, you won't need your weapons, and Luke's like, yeah, but, I don't trust that enough. I'd rather have the safety of having my tool belt,
And also it is one of the things he brings with him.
Yes, and it's literally what he takes with him.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love it.
I love it too. I want to know more about why you think vision dream sequences are usually not successful in films.
Oh, well, I will use one that is memeified as a bad example.
Okay.
You may or may not have seen it, but it's the butt of a lot of jokes, and I don't even think this one is that terrible. But the consensus is that it's pretty bad. Is that there's a sequence in Jurassic Park 3 when Alan Grant is on an airplane and he's fallen asleep and he wakes up and nobody else is on the airplane anymore. And it's like he looks in the cockpit and nobody's there. And then he hears a voice saying, Alan, and he turns and there is a velociraptor standing there. And then the velociraptor says, Alan, and then he wakes up. And I think it's because as an audience member, it's easy to feel sort of like it's easy to feel like those types of things may have wasted your time with something that isn't real, and if it doesn't do a good job of revealing some interiority of the character, if it's just something that you wanted to scare the audience into thinking that somebody was dead, but actually they're not.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like the waking up part of dream sequences often goes cheesy, and I think what you just hit on, like a I don't know, a truth that I will hold in my head, or like a standard, which is that the dream sequence should be for the character, not for the audience. Like it shouldn't be catering to the audience. Like it should, which I think that could probably apply to a lot of things in film. Is that I'd rather things be for the characters than for the audience.
Yeah, and something that to pull it toward the Last Jedi cave sequence, that I remember Rian Johnson saying either in the documentary that goes with The Last Jedi or in the commentary that the cave sequences that the cave sequence in Empire Strikes Back shows Luke the worst possible thing that he can for his journey, which is that there is some of himself in Darth Vader, or there's some of Darth Vader in himself, that those two are the same thing. And that the worst thing for Rey's journey is finding out that she raised herself. She is her parents.
Not sure I agree.
we can argue it. It's fine. I'm open to
I
all
thought
the
you were going
interpretations.
to. I
think
thought
they're
you were
great.
going to say the worst thing for her is realizing that she has, can shoot lightning and has some of that darkness in her too.
No, I think it's just that she's, that it reveals the fear that they're carrying with them. I think
Yeah.
is what I take from it.
Yeah. And I feel like the time in the character's life/journey in which we, the audience, are privy to their dream sequence is interesting, because conceivably these characters could have an updated dream sequence in 10 years that has a different fear or something. I made a little just found this in my notes, which I didn't even remember I made this. So I have in my notes this Luke versus Rey versus Yoda cave table, which I haven't really proofread it or anything. It's just for my personal notes. I probably was planning to think about it more, but forgot about it and forgot I had this table until right now. So just in terms of like the different ways that they're depicted, because I'm fascinated by dream sequence. I'm like fascinated by cave visions, and I love that we have 4 of them. So I think so far 4 of them in Star Wars.
I can add you some more, but go on.
Yeah. Okay. We definitely have Luke, Rey, Yoda, and we have Ezra. I can't remember if we have other ones from Rebels, but who are the other ones?
Okay, so I would add to that list
Ahsoka.
the game.
Does Ahsoka have one? I think Ahsoka.
I don't know.
Okay. Oh, there's ones from games? Oh, I'm interested in that.
Yeah, in Jedi Fallen Order, Cal Kestis has a great cave sequence vision that you actually get to play.
Oh.
And that's wonderful. That's a wonderful where he I don't know. Are you ever going to play this game? Or am I allowed to?
Maybe not. But you can spoil something. Listen,
the core fear in his dream is that he is responsible for his master's death during Order 66.
Okay.
Because he ran away.
Okay.
And it's very good.
Okay.
And then there's the other one that I would bring up is apparently there is one for Kylo Ren.
Oh.
Where Snoke takes him to some sort of cave of evil. It might even be the Dagobah one.
Huh.
And he Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, I don't know which name he's going by at that point, asks Snoke what's inside there. And he responds in a mirror to Yoda's line. He says, "Only what you have been too weak to bury."
Oh. Wait, is that in a
comic?
comic?
I think, yes, that's in a comic.
Okay.
And I just think that I haven't read the comic. I've only seen this page.
Now I suddenly want to read that comic.
And I like the dark side reflection of that the things that scare you in there, you're just not doing enough to bury those deep and
Yeah. That is definitely a part of like dark side training, is I guess it's discipline in a different way. It's like learning how to bury or get over the things that you haven't been able to deal with.
Or weaponize them.
Oh yeah, or like or destroy any lingering things that you, I don't know, feel soft for. Like if you have a soft spot for someone.
And also I just remembered one more from Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars, Anakin Skywalker has a
right.
cave vision. That's also
Oh,
one
that's
of my
right.
favorite moments.
I forgot about that, but I really liked that too. Okay. Nice.
And I would happily break that one down and all of the thematic beats that it hits because it's so good.
It is good. I have to rewatch that, but I did not regret watching that the 2D Clone Wars.
Yeah. So what did you?
So I guess as far as theatrical releases go that are scored by John Williams, I guess just comparing Luke to Rey, at least the different, they're both in watery environments. Okay, the Dagobah has wind, Artoo forest animals. Rey has also a very echoey place, water, and you hear really her sounds in a lot more detail. She seems less surrounded by like wildlife and more surrounded by
Right.
multiple of herself. And Luke doesn't really talk during his vision. Rey has like her future voiceover saying, "Let me see my parents," or "Let me see, please, my parents." And then the way that the visions are bookended, I guess Yoda guides Luke into the dark cave naturally after a training session in You Must Go. Yoda is waiting for Luke on his way out, and Artoo is there too. And then Rey, on the other hand, finds the dark spot herself. No one pushes her there. She's alone when she falls in, and is alone when she's alone at the beginning and end. Kylo is there on the way out, but Kylo being there on the way out is almost like Sidious being there when Anakin doesn't have someone. But yeah, Yoda definitely has Luke has a much more support system, I guess, at this point. And then musically, there are lots of similarities that I'll play some examples in a second. And then the big reveals are, first, there's the minor Luke theme that plays as Luke sees his face in the mask. And then on the other hand, with Rey's vision, the music gets sucked out when Rey touches the mirror and we hear her heavy breathing. So like the music is completely removed. There's no like heroic Rey theme, really, there's not, or even a sad Rey theme. It's just nothing. The complete absence, which I guess mirrors sort of like what her fear is, which is sort of like an absence of others. Yeah. So that's so those are some surface, just some comparisons.
Yeah. What was the young Yoda one from?
Oh yeah, the Clone Wars.
Okay, so I would add to that. You have the From a Certain Point of View book, which has a story from the point of view of the cave, and has descriptions of many cave visions, including several of Yoda going back over and over again to confront his deepest fears and regrets. And fair warning, he does see Order 66 a lot.
Oh wow. Oh, that's probably the very next story that I have in that book. Yeah, I'll probably be getting there very soon because I had the Akazagorth story like 2 stories ago, and I'm on this very long Bosk story. I think it might be the one after. Cool. I look forward to that. Yeah, so I also want to bring up this on Last Jedi season. One of the guests that I had on during this scene was Takeo Rivera, who's like a English professor basically, and playwright, and he was sort of throwing out the idea that that Rey cave vision had like a somewhat Brechtian perhaps aspect to it. And I guess Brecht, I'm not an expert on Brecht, but at least I have here in my notes, the purpose of epic theater, which I think is a Brechtian thing, is not to encourage an audience to suspend their disbelief, but rather to force them to see their world as it is. And I guess that is sort of like
Ah,
a way to think about your nightmares and visions. Yeah, and I guess Brecht uses like estrangement, alienation techniques.
uh-huh.
But yeah, these scenes are so beautiful, and filled with so much stuff. I'm gonna play a little bit of. Let's see if I can play a little bit of a comparison between magic or the cave. These- one's a cave and one's a tree, but they're both caves. It's very confusing. Okay, so here is a bit from the cave, and we'll hear some sort of similar types of ethereal, plucky instruments. This is from Last Jedi. Oh, sorry, nope. Don't worry, that's from Empire Strikes Back.
I was gonna say that's
yeah,
very
yeah.
similar.
That's so similar. Okay, here we go. This is The Last Jedi. Very low. Low woodwinds with the piccolo, very high. And then we have also moments of those like swells and swarms. So I guess here's the magic tree from Empire. And then here is from the cave, magic cave from The Last Jedi. Yeah, there are a lot of similarities, obviously. I haven't done like a full music analysis, a full like detailed analysis of both of them together, other than sort of the bigger strokes that I'm mentioning right now. So if there are some sets that they have in common or whatever, I'm sure that there are, particularly like, with so many tritones in both of them. But yeah, there's certainly like lots of instrumentation and lots of, pulling from that list of like techniques to use. Those, tremolos, those glissando, things like that.
Yeah, and going back to the showing us the world as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I remembered that I wrote something about it, but I said Star Wars is when a character goes into a spooky cave and sees a spooky vision, and then must live with the knowledge of their own spooky insecurities. And I'm being a little bit cheeky with that, but like I think that what I was trying to express is like it reveals something to the character about themselves that they then have to live with.
Yes.
And that it's not easy to live with.
Yes. And that's what makes those sequences work, as opposed to the ones where it's just like, oh, well, thank God that's not true. Like it's a nightmare, forget about it. Like,
right.
Like I feel like these visions need to impact the character in some way, even if it's not
right. And
literally what was in there is true.
Right. It's not that what literally is true, but like.
But it's true.
Yeah.
It's true, but not in that way necessarily.
Right. And I think yeah, that's a big criteria of it, is that they are just a mirror. The mirror cave is very on the nose with it, but
Luke's is too, seeing his face.
Right. It's it's a simple device,
Yeah.
ultimately, but it I think what I was going to say is I think that it being a ritual also helps with the with making it feel like it's important, that it's not just that was a pretty spooky dream. It's like this was an important
Yeah.
thing. And the other thing that I think is interesting is that Yoda will later in this movie tell Luke, "Remember your failure at the cave."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is a failure. Whatever has happened here, this is not success. And I think about that, and I wonder what exactly a successful cave vision would be.
That's a great question. Because I would think like there's not really a way to fail this exercise if you learned something
Right.
from it. But yeah, what Yoda says there is very loaded. It's very loaded.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And Luke's reaction to Rey, in the fashion of most people who are tasked with teaching the next generation, seeing them make the same mistakes that you did can be very frustrating and scary. And he clearly treats her experience as being a failure also.
Yeah.
So we still
Goodness.
don't know what a successful cave vision is.
Maybe the point of it is that they're not tests for Jedi to go through, is that by definition, a cave experience is going to be a failure, but not from the point of view of like being adjudicated as a Jedi, more like everyone, it's a rite of passage for a Jedi in training to have a really terrifying failure. And this is the nature of that failure that they have to go through. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll say like 4 more things really fast about the cave visions and all of that I just think that there's such texture to this little explored element of the Star Wars universe that I just love. That this is known in legends as the trial of the spirit, and it could take many forms and was like didn't have to be a spooky cave, but there was some trial of this sort. They had to go through like 4 distinct trials in Legends. Everything was much more hard codified in Legends than it is now, as far as what is required for Jedi training.
Yeah.
And I think now they would argue that it has been different across time for the Jedi Order because we've dug into that. And then the other thing is that the concept of vergence in the Force, a place that is strong with the Force is referred to as a vergence. And
like
so
the cave, like the tree.
Right. Yeah, and like the other tree.
Yeah.
There's the spooky tree, and then there's the unspooky tree, full of the Jedi text that's also a vergence.
Right. Yeah.
And there is Anakin Skywalker.
Right.
Qui-Gon tells the Council, "I've sensed a vergence in the Force," and Mace Windu says, "And you think it's around this boy?"
I never really connected that before. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
That would be a really weird thing.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, a vergence can refer to like an object as well, right? Like a
I think so.
like an
I mean, like
inanimate
I think it's like here's my headcanon of the doctrine of the Force, is that that a vergence is like it can be anything, but it's where the Force has been very active and it leaves a permanent like change in the currents of the Force. I don't know. There's no like it's like it's been magnetized. Like if you strike a piece of iron correctly and it magnetizes.
Wait, that can happen?
Yes,
With
it can
iron?
happen with iron. If you strike us, this can happen with screwdrivers. If you if you hit a screwdriver on a hard surface, what happens is, I mean, it's magic. I don't understand what happens, but apparently the molecules of iron can realign, and if they're all aligned, then it's magnetized.
What? Okay. Molecular people. Please explain.
Somebody who understands
please explain
magnets.
this to me. Yeah.
Explain it to both of us, because I probably just.
Well, I understand what you're saying in a way that, like, you know, like how bakers will, or okay, I'm fascinated with like sourdough bread and how people have different like people have different microbial landscapes in their bodies, and that can be changed by the bread that you're baking, and the making bread in different places can just turn out differently because the microbiome is going to be different in different places and whatever. There's a whole sourdough museum that has like starters from different countries and whatever. You can't really replicate it exactly. It's like, so I understand the way that like, I understand what your headcanon is, sort of like a place that is strong with the Force kind of leaves a colony of its midi-chlorians. Okay, I don't have to complicate it with that, but yeah, it leaves a Force signature that then kind of becomes like its whole like ecosystem. It becomes its like, I understand conceptually what you're getting at.
I love the idea of somebody of a Jedi using sourdough to explain how the Force works. That would
that would be
yeah,
funny.
These are things that I like to ponder about, and if they gave me permission, I would write an anthology of just Force visions that different Jedi and Sith and non-Jedi or Sith have had. Because, like, what happens if you're just like Han Solo walking into this cave?
Into a versions?
Yeah. Like, I want to know. I want to write that. I want to write that down.
I would be interested in that. There's something about the cave on Dagobah that I guess I wanted to throw out there, is that it's known as the Cave of Evil, specifically. So I guess I want to know, like, if, and I get the sense that the place where Rey went for her vision, was also something evil. Like, it was meant to be a dark side cave or something like that. Like, can a Jedi have a vision in a vergence that is like a light side vergence? It seems like the ones that we're getting so far tend to be dark places, but maybe that's what Jedi have to face, is, I don't know.
The Uneti tree on Ahch-To was a light side vergence.
Yeah.
And most Jedi temples are built
on a light side vergence.
Light side vergences.
Yeah. And
usually there is a nearby accompanying dark side vergence.
That's what I was wondering.
Also. And to your question of, can you have a Force vision in a light side vergence, Rey does hear voices that are not part of the soundtrack, but are part of the sound design
Yeah.
that are repeating elements of the Jedi code when she goes into the tree.
Mm. So she hears it from the light side and ends up in the dark vergence.
Well, she walks into the tree, and then later she's also called toward the other
Oh, right.
the
Yeah,
other
that's right.
versions.
Hmm.
So I
Very
don't know. I
interesting.
think maybe.
I could do with some more stories about this. Um, you sent me a link for something, and can you explain it?
Oh,
Back to
yeah.
the cave.
So Todd Vaziri is a compositor who works at ILM, and he has a blog and a YouTube channel where he just does various experiments in movie editing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ones that he did is he worked out how Luke's cave vision was achieved, how the appearance of it was achieved, which is that I think they said triple processed the footage, which means that for each frame that they filmed, they copied that frame 3 times.
Oh, I see.
So what
To give
we're
it the
watching
slow-mo
is
look.
right. So what we're seeing is 3 times slower than what they shot, which you could have achieved by using a higher frame rate, taking more frames per second, and then it would have been smooth instead of very steppy.
Right. But they filmed at
motion.
24 frames per second.
Right. So they filmed it at 24, and they play it back at 8. I think is how that math works.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went through and did an alternate version where he took out 2 out of every 3 frames. So moved it back to 24 frames a second.
Oh.
So that you can watch the real-time motion. And then he says that he took great care, and it was much harder. He said removing the frames was trivial, but getting the audio to line up again was not trivial, because he wanted as many of the beats to still hit the same.
I was going to say that I'm very curious. I'll put a link in the show notes, but I haven't watched this yet, and I'm extremely curious because I don't even know how, sound-wise that would work out. And is the music still in there?
I think the music is still in there, but I think that he has a cut in it to get it to sync back up at the end.
I feel like, I wonder how like rushed and weird it looks.
It looks very rushed. And then he adds a note that if you're watching it and it looks rushed, it's because you're used to the beats of the original.
Yeah.
Of the film version.
It's rushed in comparison to what I know.
Right. But also that if they had intended to use the full speed footage, they probably would have cut it differently. They would have used longer cuts. So everything feels a little cramped, and it's a combination of familiarity and just nobody would cut it the way that they cut it.
Yeah.
If that was
because it was always made with that intention. That makes sense. Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. Thank you for that. The last thing I guess I'll say is that there is a version of the Magic Tree that is conducted by the National Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Charles Gerhardt. It's a really great CD record, vinyl, streaming album. I think it was originally a vinyl, and it's really, really, it's a really pretty one, I have to say. And I'm sure I've recommended it before. I highly recommend it. There are symphonic suites, and it's something that came out, like, I believe 2 weeks after the I'm going to put a picture of it. It came out like 2 weeks after the proper soundtrack, and it's meant to be like, Verez Saraband, that's what it's called. It's meant to go along with the soundtrack, not compete with it. So John Williams isn't conducting. It's his music, obviously, but there are kind of different arrangements of things. It's meant to. The one disc record was intended to supplement, not compete with the official 2-record soundtrack release 1 month earlier by RSO. And one of the tracks on there is The Magic Tree. There's also a breathtaking arrangement of Han Solo and the Princess. So this album is on Spotify, so I don't think you can buy the vinyl anymore, even if you wanted it. But I've definitely recommend it. So The Magic Tree is a little bit different on that. Like the end is different and whatnot. But yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Definitely recommend. It's a gorgeous album. Do you also the asteroid field arrangement on there? We've already talked about on the podcast this season is a little bit weird, but concert arrangements are always slightly different, and that's kind of one of the interesting things about them. So, if you're mildly curious, well, yeah, just check it out. Anyway, Ender, do you have any final thoughts about this set of minutes or this sequence or anything?
I think I've said most of what I wanted to say. Just that I've realized I haven't kept completely up with this season of the show, but for the parts that I have come in for, I've been like, oh yeah, I really like this soundtrack and this movie and the way that this movie sounds. Every single time, including these set of minutes, it's just like it's one of those things that I easily forget that it's like, I don't know, there's a lot of art that this happens for me with where I know that I like it when I experience it. It's like, this is profound. And then as I get more distant from it, from having most recently watched it or whatever, I think, yeah, I like it. I remember having had a profound experience, but like, of course, it's been some amount of time. Maybe it's not. And then I go back to it and it's like, oh no, it was that good. And this is one of those.
It's funny how that happens. Like, yeah, there's like a bit of faith involved in carrying your memory of a feeling when the feeling itself isn't like necessarily as fresh as it once was. But yeah, that's good to hear. I have been feeling the same way. Sort of like, I'm glad that I knew what I was like. I don't know. I have more faith in my past self for liking this so much because I get it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, the cues from this set of minutes were /are 6M3, This Is Not a Cave, and 6M5/7M1, The Magic Tree. And then the musical themes that we hear are the main theme, Luke's theme, A section, the dark side motif, and perhaps a precursor to the cascading trumpet lines, which was that like descending planing chromatic thing. And then in the soundtrack, you can find this music on a few different tracks of different names. One is Jedi Master Revealed /Minot Cave, also The Training of a Jedi Knight, also The Training of a Jedi Knight / The Magic Tree, and also The Magic Tree. Depends on what version of the soundtrack you have, of course. It's a confusing mess. And finally, are you up for doing the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire a third time?
I'll do it. Yeah.
Do you want to know your previous answers before you answer?
Yeah, give me my previous answers.
Cool.
I think I know most of them.
Okay. So question number 1 is, in exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like? And your answer for A New Hope season was California radio voiceovers. And your answer for Solo season was actually close enough.
Okay. Yep. For this one, what should I say? I'm gonna say uh I oh uh go on with the other questions and I'll
Okay,
keep
yep.
thinking on it.
All good. Okay. Question number 2 is, what is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you want to learn more about? And previously, you said the making of one musical cue from start to finish. And then you also said how musical notation works in Star Wars. Like, what does Bith notation look like for the Cantina Band, etc.
Yeah, I mean I would like to I would like to know more about the various vocal effects used for aliens and uh, glissando lizards, and I'd like to be able to create a plugin for a uh, for a DAW basically that just lets me record my voice as in like or live playback as Greedo, as
Oh, okay.
as Boosh, as Jabba the Hutt. You know,
I doubt they would ever release that. That would be cool.
they will certainly not.
They will certainly
But
never do that. You could find like fan as close as you could get, but yeah, that would be pretty great. Yeah. Question number 3 is, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars? Do you want to know your old answers first?
I believe I said The Village,
You did.
and I said Knives Out,
Yep.
and I stand by both of them. But I would also add, because again, I'm trying to get ones that I don't think other people have mentioned, and I don't know if I'll be able to do it. But
Let's hear what you've got.
I really recently I've been listening to the soundtrack from Looper,
Okay.
which is
that also
a
Nathan
different Ryan
Johnson?
Johnson movie that also has Nathan Johnson as for the score, but it's a completely different workflow for it. They went out and recorded real world sounds and like machinery and equipment and doors slamming and things like that, and then created virtual instruments to accompany orchestrated stuff. And so there's a whole bunch of played live virtual instruments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it has I really enjoyed it.
That's cool. I think I heard that he had to learn like on the job how to do sampling.
Yes, he a friend of his knew how to do it.
Oh my
and
gosh.
helped him through the entire process the whole time. Yeah.
That's wild.
And I don't know. I want to have one more, but I don't. I'll go with Looper this time, but I wish I weren't double dipping the same composer.
Oh, that's okay. I know that you, since we last talked for solo season, you have gotten me on the Knives Out bandwagon. So now
Yes.
I'm with you on that. It was actually your Yeah, I mean, yeah, you were actually the person who pushed me to like finally watch it. And then of course we did those movie nights, and I was like, oh my god, these movies are so good. I love them. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
In exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
Exactly 3
To you
words.
today.
Yep, and I may limit it to this Star Wars.
Cool.
I think this one is. I don't know. I get very strong associations between visual elements and the sound. And so this is the most dramatically lit Star Wars, I think, still ever. I think The Last Jedi has its moments, but like inside the Millennium Falcon cockpit or the Cloud City duel, just has some of the most like operatic lighting, I think is how I might put it, where it's beyond lighting the actors and into like really setting it's mood lighting
Yeah.
to an extreme degree.
Yeah.
And so I think of the score for this one as colorful, chewy, and roller coaster.
Chewy, as in, like,
As in like yeah, I don't know what connection it is, but it like yeah, I think that like when I so when I picture the shape of the sound of like the asteroid field sequence, it is like it's like taffy, like saltwater taffy
oh, okay.
in texture. And I don't know, it's not
Interesting.
like taffy being pulled, which is the usual metaphor.
It's like taffy,
It's-
but you're biting into.
Yeah. And it's a very satisfying mouthfeel and experience. And
That's fascinating.
I don't know.
That's fascinating.
I don't have a good explanation.
That's a very unique answer. Okay, but at least now I know you didn't mean Chewy, the proper noun, Chewbacca.
I worried that would also I think that there's a lot of crosstalk in this. Is another
Crosstalk.
thing. Yeah, I think that Empire Strikes Back has a lot of crosstalk during action scenes and in the Millennium Falcon especially.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Han and Leia
Leia.
and between Han and Leia and Chewie and
3PO.
C-3PO, there's a lot of people talking over each other and telling each other to shut up or telling people that what they're doing is crazy what have you.
That's very true.
So maybe replace Chewie with crosstalk, just for the
colorful crosstalk.
for the record.
You can give 2 separate answers if you would like. With 3.
I'm done with my answer.
So is it colorful Chewy roller coaster or colorful crosstalk?
Let's do colorful roller coaster crosstalk.
Cool.
Final answer.
That's amazing. Okay, I'll put commas between them. Well, thank you so much for coming back on Star Wars Music Minute. Can you tell people where to find you these days and what you're working on?
Yeah, you can find me on the sinking ship of Twitter at AurekFonts, and at AurekFonts.github.io, and probably elsewhere soon. I
know you're on Mastodon as well.
I have a Mastodon.
You have it. Yeah, I get it.
I have not opened Mastodon. I also have a TikTok, I think, but again, I don't open that. So you can find me and follow me, but
I feel you.
and and I'm working on a very cool Star Wars logo font still.
Yes,
I'm-
I've seen previews. It's very cool.
It's almost there. It's gonna take me a few more weeks, I think, and that's optimistic.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I recommend following AurekFonts. We met on Twitter pretty much. And yeah, always find your threads and everything interesting. I'm still on the sinking ship as well. I probably will go down with the ship, probably. So yeah, see you there,
Same.
I guess. Yeah. So you can find Star Wars Music Minute on all of the usual places, but also I am not very active on TikTok or Instagram because those apps are very loud. And other than that, we are halfway through. We are halfway through The Empire Strikes Back, pretty much. Actually, slightly over halfway through. And next week, we will be getting into the end of the Magic Tree, but also we will be getting into the very first instance of Boba Fett's theme. So that will be fun to talk about. Yeah, we have a guest next week that specifically is prepared to speak about Boba Fett's theme. So that will be a first for this show. So yeah, looking forward to that. Thank you for sticking with this season. The questions have been amazing. I just got another question emailed last night that was like this incredibly thoughtful question that I am going to need to like take a while to go through all the links and references and timestamps to it. Amazing. Thank you. And yeah, thank you for everything. This always happens when we record because we tend to talk for a long time, and then by the end of it, I'm like, where are my words? But anyway, I'll be quiet now. May the Force be with you, and thank you for listening to Star Wars Music Minute.